Hello, and welcome back to another video. I'm your White Mage, and today I have something a little different. I'd like to reflect on my first year in the Final Fantasy community. When I started playing this game, I got this mat. I'm a very big fan of this image, and I decided to put it on a custom mat. I designed it myself, and sometimes if I get a trophy mat, I feel like I'm bragging if I use it. So sometimes I'll opt in to play with this one. This mat's kind of like my safety blanket. The very first event I ever went to was the Opus 7 pre-release. I didn't know much about the game, and in my very first match, I tried to block with the back attack carbuncle. Overall, I did okay. I don't even remember staying the whole event, and I had to go home. I wasn't a very big fan of the game yet. I was a big fan of the IP, and I supported it, but I didn't know if I wanted to invest a lot of time and money into the game. It didn't truly start until this. One of the players in our group invited me to spend the weekend at the Brave Exvius Fan Fest. It was very last minute, and I hesitantly joined. I was playing Water Lightning Dragoons. It was the only deck I had. I didn't have very many cards, and I lost basically every game that I played in the tournament. I got kicked in every tournament I joined, round 1, but I was able to farm Laswells from random battles because of it, and I still believe I might have the largest Laswell collection yet. At the end of the event, a man stood in the center of the play area and declared that he was going to go eat Korean barbecue and that we were all welcome to join him. I later learned that that man was the legendary Matthew Okimoto. I came from other card games, and this concept for me seemed very irresponsible and unwise. I was frequently taught to not interact with other players outside the venue. When trading, make sure they don't steal your things. There was always an us versus them mentality. But more surprisingly than a stranger inviting people to dinner was that seemingly everyone else said yes, including my friends. So this party of 20 went to go eat, where I sat next to and I got to meet the great warrior of light, Greg Cole. I met and talked with some of the best players in Southern California, and even some players from out of state. That night, I knew that I wanted to be part of this community. The very first meta potion of this year was the very first event that I wore robes to. I wore the robes and I took the name of White Mage. I chose the class White Mage because unlike most of the other classes, the attire is comfortable and easy to play cards in. I played Ice Water Category 8. And I did terribly. I think I went 1-4, but I got to meet the SoCal players a lot. I got to meet the SoCal players a little bit more, and I enjoyed every part of it. The following weekend was the Arizona Petite Cup. At this point, I was dedicated to doing better. I wanted to not be a bad player. So I practiced very, very hard with Vice Kings. I went to the tournament and I ended up finishing 3rd. I lost to Brian Berkeley in the semifinals and I was ecstatic. I qualified for the championships and I got to see the scene in Chandler, Arizona. That experience only furthered my appreciation of this community. I wasn't planning on going to the championships, but on the NA page, a stranger offered his home to anyone who wanted to attend, but didn't want to spend money on a hotel. Again, it felt like this was an unwise and irresponsible thing to do. That us versus them mentality came back, but I decided to embrace it rather than shy away. This was the first time I met Mr. and Mrs. Foglio. They opened up their home, and I'm grateful for what they had done. I performed terribly. I continued to play Vice Kings, and I almost the exact same list. I was disappointed in how I did. Looking back, I wasn't ready to perform at that level. I finished 1 and 2. I later learned who my opponents were. In my first round, I played against Kyle Peters. The second round, I played against Benjamin Parrott. They both later went on to play at the highest level of competition at the World Championships. I think I can take it a bit easier on myself for not beating 2 Worlds players. After some deliberation, I decided I didn't simply want to be part of this wonderful community. I decided that I wanted to contribute to the community. I mulled around with the idea of talking of meta talks and even recording games, but I ultimately decided on unboxings. I wasn't confident in my thoughts. I was only a couple months into the game. I didn't feel like I could talk about these topics and be taken seriously. I found a benefactor that let me open boxes for him so that my channel didn't bankrupt me. Big shout out to Jason Wyvert. After some time, I was given a spoiler. My first spoiler was the thematic White Mage. Many people were quick to point out that I resembled the White Mage, not just in robes, but in face and hair. Later on, I was also giving a Mog 13. When I started this channel, not once did I think I would be signing a non-disclosure agreement for Square. I started doing giveaways and I had amazing turnout, and I think I want to do more of this. We've been mulling around with the idea of a podcast now that we're a bit more seasoned, and we might see that through. The next event that I went to was Crystal Cup, Kansas. This was the second time that I met Christina and Patrick Folio. Again, they were kind and wonderful people, and I could not have asked for a better community. I played a Tempo Icewind deck. This is known as the Nathan Perez Special in the Southern California community. I was fortunate in my plays, and I was able to make day 2 with it. On the second day, I took part in my first draft. I was very new to it, but I wasn't particularly comfortable with it. Yet, I was able to draft a magnificent deck. My first match was on stream, and I was able to show off the Category 15 package that I had in excess of. I was able to show off the Legends of Dane that I had 2 of. Unfortunately, I wasn't a great player. The best way to describe what happened was that I drafted a 4-0 deck, but I was a 1-3 player. So I averaged out with a 2-2 record. I finished 15th in the Crystal Cup, and I felt accomplished. It was also at this Crystal Cup that I took the judge test and passed. I went to very many LQs. Some people like to mention that there are a lot of LQs in SoCal, but they're usually 20 to 30 plus people, and as opposed to smaller qualifiers with smaller crowds. I made top 8 a couple times, and the qualifier that was held in my local store was the one I eventually qualified in. I decided to play Mono Ice. This was the weekend before Gen Con. I had a build that a couple of friends of mine had put together, which later turned out to be very similar to the list that Cody qualified with. The best part of that day was that I lost to Cal McGinty in the finals, and I qualified by coming in second. I wasn't able to participate in the Dark Crystal Cup because I was already qualified, but I had some friends who weren't qualified, and I was definitely waiting to support them. At the same time, I wanted to solidify my judge status, so I shadowed Matt Okamoto, Sam Prime, and Jacob Sedloff. I gained quite a bit of experience on things like how to penalize someone who had made a mistake on their deck list, how to rewind board states, short lunches. In the end, my friend ended up getting top 4 and she qualified. You may have noticed that most of my decks contain ice. I'm a big fan of ice characters. Not exactly ice cards, but the ice characters. My favorite category is Category 8. I also really like 7 and 9 and 10. I played the PlayStation a lot. So I gravitate towards Laguna, Ultimecia, Sephiroth, and Kuja. This is a reputation I've gained at my locals, and one of my friends said that I couldn't take 2 ice decks to nationals. And this gave me the courage to take mono ice and Icewind Control. I wholeheartedly expected my card gaming career to end in the Swiss rounds, but I was able to squeeze my way through into the top 32 of Nats. In the top 32, I played against Day. Day is a good friend of mine. I'm always happy to see him. Except this time. I wasn't favored, and I got extremely lucky to draw the right cards at the right time to win the game. And in the following round, I had the honor to lose against Matt Rice. He had a very unique Fire Ice deck that had a Seed Candidate engine in it, and I lost my mind when I saw it. A side note, in another card game, I saw a man get bullied into playing for cards, and when he lost, he cried. Many people, including myself, laughed at him, and I'm embarrassed to say that I reveled in that man's misery. I enjoyed his sadness. At this event, I watched the player win, and he started crying, and his opponent embraced him. The joy he felt was shared among all of us. And that is just one of the many examples of why I truly adore this community. I finished 19th at Nationals. It was an experience that I loved, and I will gladly do again. The following weekend was the high point in my career, in my card gaming career. And the only trophy I ever got. I mentioned earlier that I was enthralled with the Fire Ice list that had Category 8 in it. So I took the deck, almost in its entirety, to the Meta Pushing Championships. The deck dominated. My only loss in Swiss was a Dan win. I had played against him a lot over the season, and I had a very hard time every time. The first 30 games that I played against him, he won all 30. But the very last time we played, I had become better. And in the final rounds of the Meta Pushing Championships, I faced him. We had a terrible game 1 and a terrible game 2 in the finals. In the first, he got unlucky. And in the second, I got unlucky. But the third game that we played, it may have been the best game of Final Fantasy that I have ever played. I entered the card judging path. Many people told me that I'd gone through a job change, but I like to think that I subclassed because I will always be your White Mage. Due to a last-minute change, I was promoted to the head judge for the Las Vegas event. It was obviously much different than playing cards, but I enjoyed it just as much. I love being part of organizing the event just as much as participating. Last but not least, the World Championships. This event was ridiculously amazing. I was just one of the judges, but even so, it was the time of my life. I love talking to all the players around the world. It was the greatest party I had ever been to. I was exhausted, I ate very little, but I would do it again in a heartbeat. At the end of the first day, Matt Okamoto wanted to practice draft, and he recruited me while looking for people. I made a joke that said, "Has anyone asked Kageyama to join?" Some people laughed. Matt did not laugh. He told me to go find him and ask him. I nervously walked up to the Hobby Japan table with the help of Richie. He asked for 5 minutes to prepare, but he agreed, and I sprinted all the way back, flailing my arms and yelling, I got him, I got him. I never would have imagined that the creator of the card game wanting to spend his free time playing casual games with us. Afterwards, we met up the people who didn't draft. They were in one of the rooms. I don't think I went to bed before 2 a.m. that night. The second day was filled with just as much partying, but there was more participation as the tournament was over and the drinks were on the house and everyone was happy. And I look forward to doing it again next year. So, I mentioned a lot of events and the many friends I've made, but I haven't really mentioned my locals. The people that I play with and talk to every day. We like to call each other Team Wingstop because when we get kicked out of our locals by the Magic players, we go to the Wingstop next door and keep playing. One time we went straight to Wingstop because of a Magic event, so we called it the Wingstop Cup. These are the friends that I met on that first day of the Opus 7 pre-release. I'm grateful for them. Big Daddy Edward Schultz shares my background of other card games. We make terrible jokes and play suboptimal title decks that are thematic. John Abanto grinds his mono water decks and always does a great job of showing me the weakness of my decks and somehow always knows how to punish my playlines. I probably spend most of my time with Inez Navarez. One day she needed a ride home from our locals and I was the only one headed that way. A few weeks later, we're driving to Arizona together, and now we're at Worlds. And there are so many more. I play Champions with Rolando. Will shows up with Fire Ice and spikes the Saturday tournament. Stan Chin shows up randomly, not to play cards, but to hang out, and we're okay with that. I love the sound of Jamie Santos' laugh. Me and Cody acapella the Balbam Garden theme song once, and it was amazing. Jason gives me boxes and he brings unique decks. Mike and I share an appreciation of Japanese cards. Sean was playing mill decks before it was meta. Brandon is our newest member, but he went the hardest both in Arizona and in Vegas. And if I didn't mention anyone, I'm sorry. I promise I haven't forgotten you. I haven't had us versus them feelings in such a very long time. I don't think I would recognize them if I did. Because there is no them. There's only us, the Final Fantasy card game community. So that's who I've met, and that's what I've done in the first year that I played Final Fantasy. And I hope to do it all over again for the second year.